Hello, my name is Rob. I'm a software engineer from California, and I've known about the field of CMNS, or cold fusion, since roughly 2010. My project is a media communications project using analytical methods. It is self-funded, although I am open to additional funding. The objective is to reinstate CMNS, as is stated in the name, to reinstate it as legitimate mainstream science. The purpose of this talk is so that we can really understand how we can help each other. I want you to understand how I'm aiming to help you and how your efforts, your activities could help this project if we collaborate. Here's the outline for my talk. And so I'd like to start with the inspiration for this project. It started with an observation. I was really surprised to learn about the impressive mobilization of Greta Thunberg's activist project. I've highlighted here specific events which were able to achieve more than 1 million participants in the year of 2019. And these are global, they are not limited regionally. And so the thought occurred to me, wouldn't it be transformative for LNR if all of these people were advocating effectively for the legitimacy of this science? Furthermore, on the inspiration for this project, I consider some of the evidence for LNR to be quite strong already. And so I've selected a few of my favorites. These all come from Mizuno's book. You see here morphological features, transmutations, and unnatural isotopic ratios. And I think that these types of evidence are all easy enough to understand by a general audience if we are simply willing to make it approachable for them. Furthermore, I think that people can take a lot of confidence in this field by observing the impressive number of researchers that are engaged in it. In this meta-analysis from 2021, we count 3,460 researchers comprising 375 distinct groups. This chart is a histogram broken down by year from 1989 to 2020, where the green bars are successful reports and red are unsuccessful. Also, this data can be broken down by the evidence, the specific type of evidence. And so this is how I see the problem concept. LNR could be a solution for the world's energy needs. And LNR is real phenomena, but popular opinion says it's not. Therefore, the institution of science has malfunctioned. To all this, I say, let's study why that is. And maybe we can do some experiments which might involve changing the perception of CMNS and maybe push things back into proper working order. Furthermore, on the problem concept, I'd like for you to consider some historical examples. For me, I consider these to be relevant. On the top is the CODEP experiment, and on the second row is the boil-off demonstration. In the CODEP experiment, the authors of A Tale of Two Journals write, the protocol has been replicated in laboratories and facilities in 5 countries over 200 times, resulting in 59 peer-reviewed papers by 2017. However, a reviewer responds that the authors still need to make the case that the underlying science is not crackpot. I submit to you that this is not scientific behavior. This is a social interaction and unscientific. I think we see a very similar thing in the boil-off demonstration. Martin, in his interview, said that he and Stan had decided they needed to move this towards a demonstration, and he felt that it had been achieved, but it is not recognized. You can see the response from John Huizenga, and this, I'm pretty sure, came from ICCF25, where he, seeing this video, says, you can't do science by videotapes. Again, I submit to you this is not scientific. This is a type of social interaction, unscientific in nature, and it's performative dismissal in my view. So I engaged in a process of trying to review the available literature. So here is a representation of my library. It's not comprehensive, but it's a good representation. I also have undertaken a review of oral histories, and I've made extensive use of Stephen Krivet's website and online YouTube channel, various documents, audio that's been uploaded to the Internet Archive, and various videos. I have reviewed these. And from all this work, I was still left with quite a few more questions, and so I undertook my own investigation, and here are some people that I've interviewed in this effort. Many thanks to all of you for your participation and your patience and your guidance. From this, I have some hypotheses. Keep in mind, I wasn't there in 1989, so for me, these are hypotheses. Maybe for some of you, you were there, and they are your direct experiences. To me, it seems that mainstream science is no longer listening, and this matches with various past controversies of science. LNR papers are being rejected, and that this has to do with the social interactions that journal editors are faced with in this particular subject. Scientists today are rejecting LNR, and this has to do with this stigma that was created in 1989, and all of this is understandable using sociology. This allows us to explain certain perplexing questions like why physicists were not persuaded by calorimetry, why social dynamics in 1989 led to a stalemate, and why critics attacked. They wanted to protect science from what they perceived as a threat. And so this leads me to a model of 1989 as well as some of 1988. I've broken it down into these 4 time periods, and I've attached to them what I think are the key characteristics which define those eras in history. And I think that we can clearly see a causal relationship between these. That is to say that the preceding eras are necessary in order to create the conditions for the following. And the reason for this, the reason for trying to develop something like this is to really address the question. For a lot of people, they can't conceive of the possibility that cold fusion is fringe science and legitimate science at the same time. These can be taken as proof that because it's fringe, it must be illegitimate. With this approach, we're able to sort of break that perception, that causal link, to say that no, it is fringe science, but because of a sociological explanation, it can also be legitimate. And so what I'd like to do in this project is going to require instrumentation, and I assume that for your activities, you're familiar with instrumentation in natural science, the ways in which you make objective measurements of your experiments. In the social sciences, we have instrumentation as well, and some examples are self-reporting as well as surveys. And what we'd like to be able to observe objectively are acceptance and rejection rates, such as some of these bullet points. And in the case of the events of rejections, we'd also like to gather data on unfair demands, outright dismissals, preprint takedowns, and if any reasons are given, which are qualitative in nature, we'd like to capture those as well. In the case of positive or negative interactions, the internet can be very useful for this. Data is easy to gather, and scientists are actually active on some of these platforms, Twitter in particular, Threads and Facebook. I talked to George Miley on Facebook. So we need some instrumentation so we can have objective measures of progress. And we need a way to do experimentation. And so here's kind of a silly illustration for that. Experimentation in this project is the process of engaging in education, what I'm calling outward communications, outward from our community to try to educate the outside world. And in this slide, I'm not drawing distinctions between various audiences, so I'm glossing over some details that we'll get into next. But this process can be applied in various mediums and contexts. So we engage in acts of education, these outward communications, and we learn from them. We evaluate the success. How well did we shift perceptions, and did we motivate people as a result? We integrate those learnings and we repeat over and over. All the while, instrumentation is present. That's represented here on the bottom as measure. It's always ongoing. And so the opportunities where we can use this are internet videos, symposiums, society presentations, guest lectures. And so who will do all this work? Well, I propose to you that we can do this together. It's your expertise that's needed, but I can help in all of this extra effort I'm proposing that will need to be done. Allow me to take that burden off of you so that you can be effective in what you're doing, and I can help you be really effective communicators. So we do need to talk about our audience, And this is how I see the breakdown. There's a general audience and your scientific community. And within each of these, there's a further breakdown. These are the groups that, as I see it, I think that we care about activists. Smart, caring individuals that they are interested in what we are doing if we can simply reach them. We also have the independently wealthy. They could probably help us, and students, we'd like to access them as well. Within the scientific community, you have those who are impartial, but just uninitiated. They don't know much about what's happening here. You also have some critics who are critics because they're not really well informed. They have a version of the history that is not quite accurate. And then you also have veteran critics, which I probably don't really need to define much. For each of these audiences, we would like to have specific objectives that we help move them towards. For the laypersons, we'd like to see them become effective, activist, advocate educators. For the independently wealthy, we'd like to help them make the process easier for them to contribute to our cause. And for students, we would also like for them to become advocates. They should be sharing the information of what's happening here with their fellow students and their professors. Within the scientific community, for those who are uninitiated, at the very least, we'd like for them to just be unopposed to what we're trying to accomplish, and at the very best, we'd like for them to become advocates. Same for our uninformed critics. And in the case of veteran critics, I'm not setting any particular expectations. I'm simply saying that if all of the above are successful, we will achieve a majority. And I also submit to you that I think the historical record has established that this is how some scientific controversies have been resolved, through a gradual process. I'd like to talk about internet videos in a little bit more, with a little bit more specificity, and we need to ask the question of how can we maximize impact? It's very important that we know the audience. We must structure the information so that it is appropriate to the given audience. You would have your information organized in a certain way for the scientific community, and it would be organized in a very different way for a general audience, but it can still be roughly the same content that you're trying to make approachable for them. And you can optionally test before you publish, and this becomes more important with longer form content. For shorter form content, it's not so important. You can mostly just try again very quickly after you can learn by making a short form video, seeing how it does, and then just try again. We can also conduct interviews, use surveys, and I would say we absolutely must use retention hacking. So here's an illustration to try and communicate what this means. YouTube provides for us analytical data that tells us about the behavior of the viewers. Were they engaged? Did they stay for the entire length of the video? Did they slowly get bored and gradually leave? Did they decide to skip ahead? Maybe they were bored, but they still wanted to know what was coming next. Or, in the case of really good behaviors, the things we are looking for, did they jump back to rewatch sections, or perhaps add a time code and share it with their friends so people are joining the video somewhere after the beginning? Or in the case of a very flat graph, everybody is watching from beginning to end, or at least close to it. So we use that to learn from, sorry, I went forward. We use that to learn from the effectiveness, where did we make mistakes and what can we do better in the future? So that's the evaluate step. We integrate and go back and repeat, continually cycling through this process, always getting better. And so the concept of a funnel is also critically important. And what I'd like for you to know about this is that these are the things I'm thinking about and where I feel that my effort can really support you. I don't want for all of your time to be spent on these types of efforts. It takes a lot of work to make good, effective communications. This is the type of thing that I can do for you. But what is a critical distinction to understand here, it's not enough to just educate people, to just put information out there. We need to have a call to action. We need to be moving people towards that objective that we talked about earlier. And this is just a best practice that is almost across all industries, and is certainly applicable for our purposes. And so we're on the closing now. I'd like to just express some limitations that I see with this sociological approach. I don't currently have a review board, and I do recognize the potential weaknesses that may impart to the effort. I recognize that there are costs, and some methods are more expensive than others. So we may need to use some creativity to try to make better use of the more affordable options. And presently, this is lacking an academic basis. I recognize this. I'm not a researcher, but I am in the process of engaging with others to learn from and try to bring in more collaborators to really create that academic basis, to bring in people who have experience running projects in a way like, in a form of applied research like this. And also I recognize that self-reporting is an imperfect tool. It is susceptible to certain biases, but it's certainly better than no self-reporting.
3 minutes. 3 minutes, okay.
3?
3.
And so the summary, to reinstate CMNS as mainstream science, this is our goal. I believe that we all share this goal, or at least most of us, and I would like for us to work on this together. And outward communications, I view these as experiments. Is this a PR campaign? I suppose that's a part of it, but I also think it's a bit better. I see this as an intervention of applied anthropology / sociology. And some final thoughts that I'd like to leave you with. Evidence must always travel a road to reach acceptance. And sometimes that road, that road is a social process, which is sometimes rocky. So I would like to try to help, if I can, by paving the road, or maybe at least adding some guardrails. Will instrumentation actually be useful? I recognize that there's a very popular belief that the transition to mainstream will happen very quickly. I hear this in the conversations of the LEC and also ARPA-E, and I'm not arguing against that at all. I believe if we think that's possible, and I do think that's possible, we should absolutely strive to and pursue that. What I think we can do here is diversify our strategies. I can't help with the other examples, I can't do work in the labs, but I can help in this regard. And so if you like, see this as a backup plan, as we hopefully move towards that rapid overnight change to mainstream acceptance. At least this will give us a strategy also in progress, in parallel. And again, I think that the historical record shows that there is a precedent. We do sometimes see that scientific controversies are resolved in a gradual process. Many thanks to all of the supporters and collaborators, and please grab a photo of this QR code. I'm running a survey, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to have your help. There's also a URL here, so yes, just grab a photo. I'm going to hold here for just a second so people have a chance to grab a photo. I guess you can also get it from the recording or from when the slides are handed out. Sorry, I guess I didn't need to go to those. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
First of all, thank you very much, Rob. It struck me there's a saying in England, it takes a village to raise a child. In other words, you need the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker and the priest and the school teacher and the whole show. And one of the things that this field has been short of for many years is any kind of sociological, psychological support and guidance. Maybe we need therapy, probably. But I think that a contribution like yours is very valuable, and I think it will spur other efforts within the field as well, which is, very useful, independent efforts. I've been discussing with my good friend Bo Gardamark here about the outline of a PR campaign, and how you do it. So maybe we should collaborate too. But it's a great thing that you're doing, and long overdue in my opinion. It's not a question, I'm sorry, but it is an expression of appreciation and support for your work.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I totally share this need, and also because I have a kind of journalistic background in the past. First of all, I would give a personal experience with the interaction of science. I was treated by a scientist as a scoundrel because I was trying to address this sector, and he said, no, it is science that has to decide what has or not to be addressed. So, I mean, what you described is an issue, and in a way is becoming self-referential, and this is part of the problem. Another thing that I didn't see enough is vested interests. I mean, I work mainly, my real job is working in electric vehicles and so on and so forth. And you see the underground campaign. I mean, you never see the name of the big guys there. But having been a journalist, I know how it works. They send a PR company with some paper that they have in some way concocted or have someone concoct for them and whatever, and then presenting you. You see, nobody's talking about it. You know, all these techniques. And frankly speaking, my concern is that this community, the moment that we stick a little bit out these kind of things, will start as I started in the past. So absolutely we have to, but we also have to be careful, and I will say something about that later on in my presentation, because in some cases we are opening the flank to the attacks by saying and doing certain things. In a way, I know this is not a nice thing, but we should sort of self-censor ourselves because it could be used against us later on. So all this is absolutely relevant. And one thing is, the last thing you said in the reply, have you heard the concept of social readiness factor or level?
So.
You know, someone is trying to introduce a parallel to TRL, SRL. And maybe these things could be linked and explored because it's not a very mature field, but some people are talking about it. And this one, in my view, exactly for all the issues that we had in the past and so on, is one where this social readiness might be very relevant. Thank you.
I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Loma Grenier.